Hello all, and welcome to the Power to the Pinky podcast with your host, Taylor Marbury. This is the second episode of the Power to the Pinky podcast, and I'm really excited because I've already had a question. All right, Melody from New York, and I love the name Melody, by the way. Love your name. She asked, can you give a simple 15-minute practice routine for guitar? Okay, yeah, I most certainly can do that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down for kind of total beginner-ish to intermediate to advanced player, okay? And you can kind of put yourself wherever you feel comfortable within that. But I do find myself trying to do 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, especially as a busy adult. As we all know, it's just even getting a few minutes here. And that's kind of the secret sauce is instead of saying I'm going to play for 4 hours, although I do love those practice sessions, it's just getting really comfortable with just, I'm not doing anything for 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there. And we do waste a lot of time. I mean, I waste a lot of time. I don't know about you guys. I waste a lot of time on my phone. I'll try to put my phone in another room and just kind of start to practice. And I like printouts, physical copies of whatever I'm working on. That tends to help from distraction, although sometimes I want to play along with tracks. Okay, so let's get into it, right? So, a couple of things here. So no matter what level you're at, I always like to start a practice session with something I'm either working on or just really like to play. And, some days it may just be a chord progression for a song I'm working on. Sometimes it might be Sweet Child of Mine. I'm not even kidding. I just like playing those songs, which is not really, air quotes, practice so much so as just, kind of getting the fingers moving and grooving, okay? Another tip that I've heard, okay, and I tell my students this one is, I think this goes more for the beginners because when you become intermediate or advanced and you have more guitars, is just to not have your guitar packed away in its case, out of sight, out of mind. Although, I don't know about you guys, I'm always thinking about guitar or something related to it. So that's a big tip already. Just leave it out, have it ready to go. Okay, so the beginners. What are we going to go through? So with my beginners and, even some of my beginner intermediate players, I kind of break things up like this, okay? I like to think of each little facet as its own little world, okay? So you can start with either, it depends on what order you want to do this, right? You pick the order, but you want to be reading some form of sheet music. Now, don't laugh. I know tabs are readily available. I'm guilty of charge. If I want to learn a song, am I going to learn the sheet music right off the bat? No, I'm probably going to look the tab up first and then maybe take a crack, at the sheet music if I need it. If I'm playing something classical, I may want to review the fingerings, whatever, okay? So, but I do usually want, my beginners to at least go through a beginner guitar book of notes in first position, okay? First position just being basically frets 1 to 3. If you add some sharps in there, you can, or flats, if you want to call them on that. But yes, so your goal is some form of note reading. Now, what does that mean? What I would do is I'd either go online and find, a book or a resource. I'm sure there's a free PDF. In fact, that's what I'm working on right now is a beginner guitar book. So I'll have one for you soon. Something like that. And just go string by string. And you can either do this by today in my 15-minute practice session, I'm just going to focus on the high E string and just have that down. Now, I have another thing. If you're not using this, an app, actually one of my piano teachers recommended to me called Note Rush. And it's about $5 on the App Store. And it's very fun. And again, if you like the tablet or the phone and you want to use technology in this, I promise you it's a lot more fun than just playing random songs sometimes. So I will do that. I do work with a lot of children, so I find that to be very helpful because it's on the screen. That's exciting. You can also do flashcards if you want to do it the old-fashioned way. It's kind of the same thing, but Note Rush is pretty cool because you just basically you're going to physically play whatever note is on the screen there. And they have some interesting themes and stuff like that. So I would highly recommend Note Rush. And okay, so we're going to read some music. That's one thing, okay? Another thing I want people to do is to read some tab because, again, a lot of the times we're going to use tab and it's great for a lot of things, okay? And what sort of things are we playing on tab? So it depends, again, on your level. If you're a beginner, I usually start people off with like a Seven Nation Army. If they're a little bit, they can go across strings. I do Happy Birthday, Twinkle Twinkle if they're really little. And now if they like rock, I'm going to show them Iron Man, Smoke on the Water. But I always ask my students what they like first, just so I don't force something upon them. Although I try to educate them on the good music. air quotes. I know that's subjective, but I do try to show them, let me say this, more guitar-oriented songs if they're coming at me with a this or that, okay? So reading music, reading tab, you don't have to work very long on that. The tab could literally just be a little riff that you're working on. But play through it at least 5 times cleanly, okay? And again, I love playing fast. But something I remember doing a lot is just playing it over and over and over again until it sounded like something. So this is where, the frustration, but if you keep doing it, you will get it. Okay, so reading music, reading tab, check, okay? And then the Note Rush app, which I highly, highly recommend. Again, just because there's been situations where I have had to read sheet music as a guitarist. I was handed the sheet music and had a singer say, hey, can you play me that melody or that sort of thing? Now, again, my career is in music, so that might be part of it, but it's just a really good skill. And if you ever decide to learn any other instrument, well, guess what? Then you'll know at least treble clef, right? It's kind of learning like a secret code language. I'll show my non-musician friends, a piece of sheet music, and they're like, what is that? So I say, I can't speak another language, but I do speak music. And let's not forget there's memes because guitarists cannot read music. I know, do not be the meme. Do not be the meme. Learn your notes, even first position. You don't have to do anything more than that, okay? So after that, okay, so all of that should take no more than 5 minutes, okay? So you have 5 minutes there. We have 10 minutes left, okay? Now, we want to be doing chords, okay? So we have our sheet music and our tab on one part. We want to make sure we are always making sure we know our chords, okay? Now, if you're a beginner, you want to make sure you know your chords. Now, I'm not talking about sevenths or ninths or any extensions. I'm literally talking about A minor, A major, E minor, E major, G, just your cowboy chords, as we call them, okay? Because a lot of the time as a guitarist, especially if you want to sing and play guitar, we're going to be playing cowboy chords. So I like to approach it always in a song, but if you just want to go through and print out a chord chart and say, okay, today chord of the day is going to be a C major and just get it. And if you can't get it, what's funny about chords is I remember, for example, like a B7. I couldn't get it to ring out. I couldn't remember it. I could not remember B7. I remember that one because it was in like every Beatles song ever. And I was like, why B7 is the death of me. But now it's one of my favorite chords. So also keep that in mind. Perhaps you're working on bar chords too. Okay. So kind of build into that. And we'll talk about exercises you can do to make bar chords easier. We're going to do a whole podcast just on that because who likes bar chords? I personally love them. But back in the day, I don't know about that. With the chords, anything, it doesn't need to be too crazy or it can be totally crazy, but just something with basic major and minor chords. I have some students that want to play Johnny Cash. Believe it or not, I have a 10-year-old little girl. She's like, can we play Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard? I'm like, oh my gosh. And then others that want to do Sabrina Carpenter, Travis Scott, Kendrick Lamar. I mean, anything that gets them excited. I have an 11-year-old that wants to play Dire Straits. We want to feel motivated to play the guitar. We want to play the songs we like. So you play whatever you like. Again, I love rock. I love that sort of stuff. I love a lot of funk now, that sort of thing. I'm going to play the stuff that excites me. And back in the day, I got a book of Beatles songs, literally a printed out copy. And I just went through and learned every Beatles song. And the really cool thing about Beatles music, we're going to talk about a lot about the Beatles on this podcast, is it introduces you to a lot of chords where you'd be like, where would I ever see an E minor 6? And then you open up some random song and you're like, there's an E minor 6. My first chord songs were Viva La Vida by Coldplay and Wonderwall by Oasis, which I realize is the meme, right? It's like, anyway, here's Wonderwall. But there's a reason for that because we're just trying to get chord transitions, okay? So you want to make sure you're doing chords. Now, there's a trick to this. I call it the hand pull away chord game, where you test your knowledge of each chord by quite literally pulling your hand off the guitar to reset and get the muscle memory down. So like, for example, you grab a C chord, pull your hand off the guitar completely off, okay? And then go reset. Can I get it? And making sure you understand how to read chord boxes. Again, I'm talking about super beginner, and we can even do a lesson on that if you guys have questions on that too, okay? So again, kind of diving in deep on that. But so far we have read some music in a beginner book or anything like that. Read some tab. It can be simple riffs, that sort of thing. And then play chords. Just even if it's a new chord of the day, whatever you want to do. Just something, maybe you're practicing the chord transition between like C to G, right? So chord and or chord transition. Okay, and then the last thing, so we've probably eaten up at least 10 minutes by now, okay, on your practice journey here. And then, do you know the major scale? Do you know the pentatonic scale? If you know the pentatonic scale, can you play all the positions of the pentatonic scale? That should be somewhere in your practice. And it can literally be, pentatonic scale in E minor, which again, if for those of you that know, it's very simple. Just starting in, there's 5 positions, so you can just start with the first one until you have it memorized. And I always tell my students, scales are something I would memorize, which we use them anytime. Anytime I'm at a jam sesh or I'm playing or I'm improvising, I'm playing scales. And this is coming from somebody that literally used to loathe scales and reading sheet music and all of that. I remember saying, I'm never going to learn to read sheet music, okay? So again, just go through your scales. Now, the cool thing is you may also want to practice some hammer-ons and pull-offs in there, okay? So when you are doing that, or any like slides, bends, you name it, rakes, alternate picking, you basically can double dip for the scales, as you can also practice those as hammer-ons and pull-offs. And you can do, different things with all the different positions. You can slide through those. I also really like saying the names of the notes up and down the neck, which that's another thing we'll talk about too. Okay, and then if you're crazy and you're like, you know what, I actually want to make it 20 minutes of practice, you can do a little finger picking. Okay, I'm a big advocate of the PIMA method for any style of music. I learned it when I was studying classical guitar, but you can pretty much use it for anything or any variation of it. I've kind of, I don't know how good my classical technique is anymore because it's gotten a little sloppy with my cover gigs and that sort of thing. I will say it's very nice. It's a good way to learn, how to relax your hands. And we'll talk about that more down the line. So that's for my beginners. Okay. So again, let's go just real quick. It's going to be reading music or reading tab or both, hopefully, chords or chord transitions. Okay. And then you want some kind of scale and maybe some technique in that. That should keep you busy. And if you do that, again, even once a day for a few minutes here, a few minutes there, you will see improvement. And I find myself when I'm even trying to practice 15 minutes, again, it ends up being about an hour, which I wish I had more hours in the day to practice. Okay, so now we're going to talk about intermediate to advanced. So I would say, again, you want to start with something you're excited to play, anything, okay? Most of the time, I'm going to do some little exercise I like, some chromatic scale stuff maybe, and just kind of warm my fingers up. I may play some beautiful chords I like. I love doing that. I like just kind of going through all the different chord shapes and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, so just something you're just waking the fingers up. You're like, I love the way this G major 7 sounds. Let's just kind of noodle on that for a minute. Then scales. Okay, we're going to hit the ground running on this. So you play something you like, then you jump in with your scales real quick. Do you know all of the like I mentioned before, do you know all the positions of the pentatonic scale? Can you connect those? Do you know the notes in those scales? So maybe something you try to do is like, okay, I know my C major scale, then tomorrow, do I know all the notes in my D major scale? And can I play that in random places like around the neck? So that's what I try to do when I practice. I'm like, okay, so I know a C major scale, no sharps, no flats, right? But can I play that everywhere, all over the neck? And there are patterns, right? There are certain patterns for these scales. So I like guitar so much because it is all pattern based. But do I know the notes and the scales? And that's going to come in handy when I really start the next thing I want to practice, which is practicing improvisation with a backing track or a loop pedal, which I've actually found I've written songs from doing this. It's a great way to get some melodic ideas out. I used to kind of adamantly be against loop pedals, but I started incorporating one. As my thing is, I'm like, as long as I am live looping, nothing at my gigs or my shows, or even when I'm practicing, is pre-recorded. So as long as I'm live looping, which again, practicing with a looper really does help your timing. So that's another thing you can practice too. In that little mix, okay? So loop pedal, or if you're like, just go on YouTube, A minor backing track. I'm going to work on the A minor pentatonic scale and throw in the blues note in there. And I'm going to really focus on like, okay, so this chord progression is A minor, let's say F, E, okay? And I'm really going to chord tone target when I'm doing that. And if you don't know what that is, we're going to have another episode on that, okay? So quickly on this one, again, just kind of warm up, and then you have some scales, go through, say the names in your head or say them out loud. It is super helpful to know what notes are in what scales instead of just memorizing the patterns. Really understanding how it's all connected and what a minor pentatonic is, what a major pentatonic is, and how to use those and blend them. How to use the major scale, how to use the 3 types of minor scales. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, so that, again, shouldn't take more than like 5 to 10 minutes there. I would also recommend a song that challenges your chops. Now, I would just do a little bit of this at a time. For example, maybe some crazy, Megadeth solo, maybe like Tornado of Souls or Ozzy Osbourne, RIP, right? Or maybe like, some Metallica little section where they're kind of doing just a technique that challenges you, whether that be sweep picking or tapping, or maybe alternate picking very quickly. Maybe it's Thunderstruck, maybe still like just kind of playing along with that and keeping a nice steady beat. And again, you only need to do that for a few minutes. But again, like with the beginners, do it cleanly. Slow it down if you need to, but do it cleanly. So something that challenges your chops. The last thing I would do is chords and chord voicings. Now, also same as the scales, what notes go in what chord, and the ways to play them up the neck, right? So if you're a fan of the cage system, which if you've not heard of that, we will have a whole lesson on that. Basically being able to say, okay, a C major chord has a C, E, and G. What are the ways I can play that, right? And I have a couple of chord books that I go through for, besides the cage system. I just like seeing all the ways I can do that little triad or expand it or put some open strings in there, or all you want to be able to do all of your major and your minor chords without a doubt, and then major minor sevenths and dominant sevenths. You should know add 9 versus 9, add 11, basically start to really get into the extensions and understand what they mean. And again, this may be something you see in a song, right? Like I mentioned, the Beatles stuff is great for that. If you're into jazz at all, and again, it doesn't have to be hard jazz. It can just be some of the stuff, or like, Autumn Leaves, Blue Bossa, just like, your basic jazz tracks will introduce you to a lot of these chords. So again, and it doesn't mean you have to be a jazz player, okay? I think my students get scared when I say the word jazz because they think elevator music, but it's not that. It just will introduce you to some really fun voicings. And actually, a lot of the times, like even if you play like Pearl Jam or something like that, you'll see, oh, this like, Black, they're just playing an E chord and they're just adding this note here and there. So I think another thing is like analyzing what you're playing. Really quick, let's go through the advanced again. So again, warm up, something you're excited to play, do some scales, say the names of those notes in the scales as much as you can. I can't stress that enough. After you've done the scales, then use that scale to improvise over either with your loop pedal or a backing track. And then again, you can do some exercises that tie into the scales. Like I mentioned for the beginners, if you're like, man, I really can't get these, hammer-ons that fast or as clean as I want. Okay. And then a song that challenges your chops, or a piece of a solo, or just something outside of your comfort zone, which we're all guilty of this. I'm like, I'm practicing, but I'm literally just playing stuff I already know. Doesn't count, right? We want to get uncomfortable. Okay. And then chords and chord voicings, being able to know what chords are in an F major 7 and where can I place that on the neck, right? How many ways can I play F major 7 and which voicings do I like? All right. So that's Melody. I hope that answers your question, right? On 15 minutes of practice. And again, you can easily turn that 15 minutes into something much more. But again, just the overall, just touching on each of these little things, it just a little bit every day, right? We're just kind of chipping away. That's the one thing I love about music is, right, we can play, and never truly master an instrument, right? That's exciting. That's scary. That's daunting. But it's also kind of fun because it just means there's endless knowledge and things for us to learn. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions on anything I went through within that practice plan, please let me know. And we'll do another episode on really kind of diving in for those of you that want a longer practice or more tips and tricks on that. Another thing I do want to mention is I do have my Beautiful Chord of the Day series. And sometimes it's Beautiful Chord of the Week. Sometimes it's chord progressions on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find it, Taylor Marbury Music. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can see that on there. But that'll give you, again, a little bit more practice to add in the chords. And I'm also going to be posting more lessons on there. So again, check it out. It's going to be really fun. It shows some really interesting chord voicings because that is something I'm a huge fan of. That's why I love guitar so much, because you can put so many chords and they all have such a different sound to them. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much. Again, please follow and subscribe on the podcast as we're getting things up and running. Get excited for the next episode coming out next week. All right, I'm going to answer any questions you guys have. Remember to send any questions you do have to taylormarburymusic@gmail.com. It'll be in the show notes on there in the description, all right? Follow and subscribe. Power to the Pinky with your host, Taylor Marbury.